Part 43. A Middle School Cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 423. After the death of Furukawa Nagisa appeared in the comic Clannad, this comic did encounter controversy from many readers. However, with the appearance of Shio, and as this sensible and strong little girl began to occupy an important position in the comic, readers 11's anger also calmed down a little over time. However, as the plot of the comic Clannad gradually unfolded, readers gradually realized that something was wrong. To be specific, it should have started with the part where the always lively and cheerful 11 fell ill. Seeing how Shio had a fever at the beginning in the manga, and gradually developed into being too ill to go to kindergarten, and then Okazaki Tomoya had to quit his job to take care of Shio, not to mention Yoshida as the editor-in-chief, even the readers from the comics, we can vaguely guess 11's next tragic fate. Originally, Yoshida thought that the plot of Nagisa Furukawa being drawn to death in the manga was enough to show the madness of a middle-class cartoonist, but what Yoshida never expected was that Makoto Takahashi, who had already exceeded the bottom line of his expectations, actually drew the plot of 11's tragedy. Hey, Yoshida, look at this plot. A die-hard editor and reader of the manga Clannad on the editorial side slammed the newly released monthly magazine on Yoshida's desk, and roared at Yoshida with red eyes, "Didn't you say that this manga will have a happy ending? Xiao Nagisa is already dead, and then Shio will get a bento. What kind of happy ending is this? This is simply a countdown to destruction. Soulless." I was just wondering why Yoshida didn't show off the plot of the manga to us as usual after he got the manga manuscript back last time. It turns out that Yoshida had already known that the content of this chapter was like this, so that's why he told us submit it in advance before you finish the manga. Another editor, who is also a die-hard reader, pushed up his glasses with his hand, and with an expression of "I knew it was like this," he began to settle accounts with Yoshida. Back then, you were boasting to us, saying that the comic Clannad would end with a healing and heartwarming ending. Now it seems that the ending rhythm is correct, but what the hell is this? It brings healing and warmth, but it simply brings depression and despair. Ah, that's what Aiken said. Yoshida also knew that it was hard for him to defend himself now. Although the reasons for being tricked are different, but, since they are also tricked, why do people hurt each other? Hey! Who will believe you now, Yoshida? After a colleague on the editorial side complained in a disdainful tone, he raised his hand and looked at his watch, with a look of despair on his face. Don't forget that today is a monthly publication. On the day of release, the phone calls from the editorial department are about to be blown away again. Everyone is waiting to die. Other editorial colleagues who did not participate in mocking Yoshida initially took a gloating attitude towards Yoshida's current predicament, but soon, everyone stopped laughing. Because the phones in the editorial office began to ring crazily one after another, as if a chain reaction had occurred. Humph, those guys still want to cause trouble for me. Just spend the rest of your life slowly with endless phone calls and endless complaints from readers. The colleagues who looked at the editor's side began to chatter. After answering the phone, Yoshida excused himself to collect manga manuscripts. With a broken smile on his face, he arrogantly left the editorial office. Although other people on the editorial side also knew that Yoshida was planning to take the opportunity to escape from the phone storm, the editors who were busy answering the phone to comfort the readers could not prevent Yoshida from leaving. Nachi was able to comfort him with a kind and patient tone. On the reader's side, he was sending the most vicious curses to Yoshida in his heart. If the editors on the editorial side knew about the legendary Hell communication, Yoshida would have already taken a boat to hell within Mai, right? Yoshida said he was going to collect manga manuscripts, which was not an excuse. After all, if Yoshida really returned to the editor's side empty-handed, he would definitely be beaten to death by a group of resentful colleagues, so Yoshida's first stop was choose to go to Little Sea Otter to receive comic manuscripts. However, contrary to expectations, the Little Sea Otter is comforting Miss Kangshuhong, who is in tears because of the comics. The manga manuscript has not been sorted out at all, although the little sea otter is usually bullied by Yoshida, at this moment, but the little sea otter finally mustered up the courage to confront Yoshida head-on. "Mr. Yoshida, do you want the manga manuscript now?" The little sea otter opened the door with the safety bolt and looked at Yoshida through the crack of the door timidly. "It's not very convenient for me to tell you now. The manga manuscript hasn't been sorted out yet, okay, so." Hey Maru-kun, are you lazy again and not finishing the manga?" Even though he was blocked by the door, Yoshida was still able to exert mental pressure on the little sea otter through the door crack. "This won't work. Don't forget now that you are married, it is not an easy task to support a family, and this is even if you don't have children. If you have children in the future, it will be a huge deal. What about expenses? If you don't draw comics seriously, it won't work. Yoshida, I have more important things to do now." The sound of a woman crying came faintly from the crack of the door, and then the little sea otter was domineering for once, although his tone was still full of anger. "Here, Maru-kun, what on earth are you?" Before Yoshida finished asking, the little sea otter gave a reply by closing the door directly. Of course, the things that made Yoshida's mouth twitch were still to come. "Yuli-chan, a newspaper salesman just came, but I chased him away." "Don't cry," Lord Fengguanjin said that the end of the comic Clannad must be a happy ending. If Yoshida hadn't heard the sound of the little sea otter locking the door before, and faintly heard the little sea otter talking nonsense, Yoshida would definitely use the magic skill of anti-Shui possession to start banging the door. So now, the only way is to go to Cheng's place. After walking out of the apartment building where the little otter lives, Yoshida looked up at the gloomy sky, with an extremely complicated expression on his face. After a long time, he sighed, "Well, it's time to end everything. Don't even mention Furukawa Nagisa, even Chio is now a tragedy. Do you still dare to swear that this comic is a happy ending? Originally, I thought that although you have a bit of a middle school personality, you should still have a bottom line as a person, but after reading the content of this episode, I really understand that for Cheng you, as a guy, have no bottom line as a human being at all. Speaking of which, Cheng, you definitely did it on purpose, right? You drew all kinds of happy stories before, in fact, just to make readers immerse themselves in the happy daily life and lose their defense, and then suddenly come up with something like this. Cheng, your evil taste is really hopeless." Although Yoshida really wanted to say this to Takahashi Makoto, but considering the bad nature of a certain middle school cartoonist who only allows himself to make evil comments about others but not others to make evil comments about himself, Yoshida stopped and looked at the stationery store on the side of the road and entered the rhythm of meditation. It's not that he wants to go to the stationery store to buy paper and pen to write down the domineering preaching declaration that he just imagined. Yoshida is just considering, if he really wants to punish Takahashi Makoto, should he write a will first? However, when he was about to knock on Takahashi Makoto's door, Yoshida, who had calmed down, changed his mind. It wasn't that he suddenly realized that he didn't have the courage to confront Takahashi Makoto head-on, nor did he suddenly think of the tragic consequences of confronting Takahashi Makoto head-on, nor was it that his soul was afraid of succumbing to a certain second-year cartoonist and made his body make such a choice against his will. Yoshida just suddenly remembered the expression on Takahashi Makoto's face when he was observing the letters from readers. Whether he was scolded and accused by readers, or not understood and accepted by readers, or even threatened and intimidated by readers, however, Takahashi Makoto, cartoonist Hauer Kyoma, never complained about it once, and still completed the comic manuscript on time every week and every month. Although Takahashi Makoto said that he drew comics because of interest, Yoshida didn't think so. Interest may be able to support it for a while, but is it just because of interest to achieve the level of Takahashi Makoto? No. It's not like that. Yoshida admitted that the plot of the comics is very heartbreaking and depressing, but it is also undeniable that the plot of the comics is also impressive. The reason why I can't accept the development of the plot may be simply because humans have become accustomed to the setting that comics should end in a comedy and have become accustomed to finding a sense of comfort in comics. So, since I am the editor-in-chief of the cartoonist Fengguangai Yuan Kyoma, I should not blame or complain about Takahashi Makoto like others do at this moment, but should stand by the cartoonist and give the cartoonist under my command the most powerful support. Now that the plot has developed like this, it's too late for you to make up for it. Although you once said before that the comic Clannad will end with a happy ending, but judging from the current situation, this kind of plot development is actually a very good choice. After all, compared to comedies, readers have a deeper impression of comics with tragic endings. Although at the beginning, I was just as difficult to accept the plot development of the comic as everyone else, but since it is a comic drawn by you, you must have your intentions. As the editor-in-chief, I should not interfere with your construction of the comic, whether out of emotion or reason. Yoshida, whose mood changed, showed a firm expression on his face and knocked on the door of Makoto Takahashi's house. "Oh, my beloved cat, you came at the right time." Makoto Takahashi was still sitting cross-legged on the chair as usual. "Hey, Makoto, about the comic Clannad." After Yoshida took a deep breath, he was about to open his mouth to express his position, but was interrupted by Makoto Takahashi. "Tisk. Did you know?" Takahashi Makoto's face, which was full of smiles just now, immediately changed to a look full of resentment. "Spies in the organization are everywhere. Is your real rank an assassin?" "Yeah, I know, Know what? Forgive Yoshida for being slow to react because of his worries. Of course the content of the comic Clannad has been completed, Makoto Takahashi said, and he did not forget to wink at Uncle Ding Ding beside him. The comic manuscript on the table is the final chapter of Clannad. Finished. The comic Clannad is finished. Yoshida looked at the comic manuscripts piled up on the table, and he felt sick. "I'm sorry to say that after working overtime yesterday, I planned to take a break and write, but alas, I won't say the reason. Anyway, it's the fault of a certain cat. I'm sorry, dear readers, meow." A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Mao. Chapter 424. Although Yoshida seemed quite surprised for a moment when he suddenly learned that the manga Clannad had ended. Although all the rhetoric he had prepared with so much effort was visually useless, this did give Yoshida a reason to be angry, but after seeing Makoto Takahashi's smiling expression, Yoshida still tried his best to restrain his anger that was about to explode. "Ugh. Not pleasant," someone muttered and turned his head away like a child having a tantrum. After seeing Yoshida suppressing his anger in a short period of time, using only a look of hatred and launching a useless mental attack on himself, he began to read the manga manuscript on the table. Takahashi Makoto was a little dissatisfied. The ground curled his lips. Originally, Makoto Takahashi planned to ridicule Yoshida, further irritating Yoshida and causing a certain editor to lose his mind and attack him in anger. However, he saw that Yoshida was observing Clannad intently. After the comic draft, Takahashi Makoto still interrupted the taunting skill he was about to release. This is not a sudden discovery of conscience by a middle-class cartoonist, but because the Clannad comic draft that Yoshida is observing at the moment, like Uncle Tintin before, is not a true complete version, so, Makoto Takahashi is looking forward to Yoshida observe your reaction after finishing the manga draft. Although Uncle Tintin wanted to remind the responsible editor several times before Yoshida inspected the manga manuscript, but after noticing Takahashi Makoto's warning eyes, Uncle Tintin backed down. At this moment, Tintin's only choice what can be done is perhaps to keep looking at Yoshida with sympathy and compassion, so that after Yoshida feels his strong gaze, he can wake up on his own and realize that something is wrong. Writing this, I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network Rightward Arrow. But it is a pity that Yoshida, who has been completely immersed in the final chapter of the comic Clannad, is all focused on the comic manuscript in his hand. The tragedy seems to be unstoppable. As an assistant, Tintin helped Takahashi Makoto complete the comic draft of Clannad from time to time, but when he saw the final chapter for the first time, he still found it difficult to accept the sudden unfolding of the plot in the comic. After Makoto Takahashi reminded that the key content of the comic's final chapter is still missing, Tintin gradually understood the final chapter of Clannad after repeatedly observing the comic manuscript several times. And Yoshida, who has only been responsible for collecting and reviewing manga manuscripts, not only does not have the experience accumulated from completing manga manuscripts before, but also does not have the key tips. If he can see the manga manuscripts, Takahashi Makoto may consider it. Isn't Yoshida the same kind from another world? Cheng, are you sure this is the final chapter of the comic Clannad? This was Yoshida's evaluation with a horse face after reading the manuscript of the comic Clannad. My beloved cat, isn't this the happy ending you are longing for? Huh. It's rare for you to give alms with kindness this time, but you will have doubts one after another. This is not that Takahashi Makoto is being arrogant, it's just that because after being suspected by Uncle Tintin, he was angry and annoyed after being suspected by Yoshida again. The ending of the comic Clannad this time, I didn't intend to deceive the readers at all, so after seeing the happy ending of the comic and hearing the good news, you should be very happy. Cheng, have you actually reached the level of being so shameless that you can say such things without changing your face? Yoshida rolled his eyes and stared at Takahashi Makoto, with a look of helplessness on his face. He put his hand on his forehead and fell silent. After a long time, he said quietly, yes, judging from the content of the plot, this is indeed a happy ending that readers can accept, but, Cheng, don't you think this change is too abrupt? The comic Clannad is obviously just a simple school comic, but now it has developed into a fantasy comic. My beloved is a cat, it doesn't make sense. Regarding Yoshida's statement, Takahashi Makoto, who was well prepared, pulled out a previously published monthly magazine from the table, spread out the part that serialized Clannad, and red-faced said with confusion, if I follow what you said about my familiar cat, then when it was serialized to Fuko-chan. This is different, although Yoshida really wanted to say this, the facts listed by Makoto Takahashi made it difficult for Yoshida to refute. At the end of the Fuko chapter, although no one remembers Fuko, who is lying in the hospital, appears in the school as a spirit body in order to let everyone attend the wedding of Mr. Ibuki. In the meantime, they were constantly carving starfish and giving them away. Although when observing the content of that chapter, many people had already complained that the comic Clannad was visually intended to change from a simple daily college comic to a fantasy comic, but with the next wave, with the emergence of a wave of touching plots, the readers and editors who were immersed in the comic plot gradually ignored this problem. Therefore, if Takahashi Makoto had already begun to lay the groundwork for the ending of the comic Clannad when he serialized the Fuko story, if combined with the plot of the Fengzi chapter, this ending seems to be acceptable, Yoshida's inner thoughts have begun to waver, but he has not completely accepted it. But Aiken, if you really design the plot like this, the content of this chapter needs to be slightly modified and added. Even I was barely able to accept this ending after your reminder, so what about the readers? It must be impossible to think of it at the moment. Oh, my beloved cat, are you really trying to bribe the arrogant cartoonist Phoenix Inferno with flattery? Makoto Takahashi's face became serious, but when he spoke, it's still that irritating tone. This is not okay. I am planning to become a partner of justice. How could I give up my noble justice and agree to your request because of your flattering words? No, this is not my request, but a plea. It is a lifetime request. Yoshida obviously wanted to enter the murderer mode and divide Takahashi Makoto into 17 parts, but he had to force out a smile. However, his acting skills too exaggerated. If you want to hide murderous intent through your smile, Yoshida, you don't have the assassination talent like a certain Nagisa whose gender is Hideyoshi. Huh? Pleading, regarding Yoshida's wording, Takahashi Makoto repeated with some confusion, humph. Tell me, my beloved cat, what exactly is it that you want? Cheng, Clannad is an amazing comic. This is not a compliment or flattery, but my heartfelt emotion after observing the comic. Yoshida did not pay attention to the tone of Takahashi Makoto's words, but said to Makoto Takahashi with a serious face, although as the cartoonist's editor, I should not interfere too much in the cartoonist's creation of comics one, but as a reader, as a person who has been silently supporting the comic Clannad reader, as a reader who sincerely likes the comic Clannad, I sincerely hope that I hope that Mr. Ji Zhen of the Phoenix Institute can complete this comic seriously and give this comic a reasonable conclusion, an ending that all readers can accept. Makoto Takahashi, who used to like to mock Yoshida at critical moments, fell into silence for the first time. Cheng, whether you want to torture readers through comics, or whether you want to deceive readers through comics to gain pleasure, it doesn't matter. Yoshida's state today seems a bit abnormal, at least to Takahashi Makoto in my memory. This passionate mode has almost never appeared. But Aiken, at least when you finish the comic Clannad, I hope you can complete this comic in the most normal way and give this comic the most appropriate ending. Please. This is me, Yoshida Koji's lifelong request. Hey, my beloved cat. Makoto Takahashi came back from the silence. After staring at Yoshida for a long time, he sighed faintly. The ending of this manga is really worth your time. Do you want to ask for it all your life? I don't know either. But Yoshida picked up the manga manuscript in his hand, with a very complicated expression on his face, and slowly said to Takahashi Makoto, if this manga is really written in this way, at the end, my gut will not accept it. Is it intuitive? Hey. That's true, Makoto Takahashi interrupted Yoshida's unfinished words unceremoniously and snatched the manga manuscript away. I also asked why you, the cat of my family, are in a strange state today. It turns out that the soul of the responsible editor hidden deep in the body has awakened. Things like that are, big, probably not. Hey, Yoshida, don't be so unsure. There is absolutely no such thing in your body. You are a normal human being. Now, Aiken, since Mr. Yoshida has already mentioned it, that's pretty much it. Inspired by Yoshida's words, Uncle Tintin, who had been standing by as an observer, finally couldn't help but intervene in the conversation. Bring out all the manga manuscripts for the final chapter of Clannad. That's right, if you play with it too much, my familiar cats may break. Whether it's repairing damaged items or recultivating new toys, visual inspection is more troublesome, Makoto Takahashi said. While taking out some comic manuscripts from the drawer, he briefly observed the comic manuscripts in his hands, and then mixed the two parts of the comic manuscripts together in the true order. Hey, my beloved cat, this is the true conclusion of the comic Clannad. Yoshida's expression suddenly froze, and then he snatched the manga manuscript from Makoto Takahashi's hand, and before flipping through it, he asked in a low tone unwillingly, then those just now are? Of course it's the content of the final chapter, it's just that the completion plan has not been carried out yet. Takahashi Makoto raised his thumb and laughed triumphantly, but I really didn't expect that my cat could say those words, tisk tisk tisk, this time it really refreshed my understanding of you. I can understand your feelings, Mr. Yoshida. As the first Tintin to be killed by Takahashi Makoto in this way, he patted Yoshida's shoulder sympathetically and said so. The murderous aura has spread to his eyes. Yoshida is about to go berserk. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao SD email. Chapter 425. Chapter 425 Who Are You? The hidden part of the final chapter of the comic Clannad is undoubtedly the part about the girl who doesn't know the cold and the dumb robot in the silent world, that is, the fantasy world of Shio and the robot form of Tomoya Okazaki. Story, as Takahashi Makoto said to Uncle Tintin before, adding this part of the plot later is the core content of the final chapter of the comic Clannad. Even though Yoshida felt emotionally like a slap in the face to a middle-aged cartoonist after learning the truth, his rationality stemming from animal instinct kept protesting and warning, reminding Yoshida all the time that once he did something, he will be tortured to death by a middle-class cartoonist, although he said that, judging from the expression on Yoshida's face when he left, the ending of the comic Clannad is still acceptable to the eye. As for how Yoshida felt after completing the real final chapter of the manga Clannad, Makoto Takahashi did not ask. It's not just because Yoshida's inner emotions have been fully expressed on his face. Look is very good interpretation, and more importantly, Makoto Takahashi has completed the entire comic Clannad. If you are still struggling now, what's the use? And if Yoshida really puts forward any constructive opinions or suggestions, Takahashi Makoto will definitely nod in agreement at the beginning, and at the same time, he will not forget to induce and encourage Yoshida to continue talking. Wait until Yoshida's mouth is dry. When speaking, Makoto Takahashi would smile and nod in agreement with Yoshida's various views, and then not make any modifications to the manga manuscript. According to Makoto Takahashi's evil taste, this is probably the development model, right? Although all the manga manuscripts of Clannad have been completed, this does not mean that they will be serialized immediately. After all, judging from the current serialization volume of the monthly magazine, it is estimated that it will take at least 3 months to actually start serializing the final chapter. However, for the assistant side, now that the comic drafts of the comic Clannad have been completed, the assistant's work will not be as heavy as before in the following days, at least for the assistant side who is used to being busy. After Makoto Takahashi announced that the Clannad manga manuscript had been completed, he felt a lot more relaxed indeed. For example, Miss Aoi Ueno, because she no longer has to be as busy as before to complete manga manuscripts, she has a lot more time to play with Rin and Seiji. Another example is that Uncle Tintin does not need to face a mountain of manga manuscripts, so he spends a lot of time every day being able to go home early to practice as a full-time dad. For another example, Jing He didn't need to be immersed in the processing of the Clannad comic manuscript, so he used the extra time to complete his own comics. However, whether the comic manuscript of Clannad is completed or not does not seem to affect assistant Mayuri. Although Takahashi Makoto was kind enough to share the work that Mayuri should have done alone among others, it didn't seem to improve Mayuri's busy work status much, so she kept immersing herself in completing the manga every day. Of all the assistants, Mayuri seems to be the only one. Huh? This is it. After standing behind Mayuri and observing for a while, Takahashi Makoto let out a cry of surprise, and then before Mayuri could react, he quickly picked up the completed manga manuscript on the table. Phoenix Academy teacher. Jinghe, who was on the side, seemed to notice the abnormality here. He immediately stood up and came to Mayuri's side. He apologized and began to explain to Takahashi Makoto, "Sorry. I asked Mayuri. Ruko, you asked Mayuri to complete your manga manuscript. I have known about this for a long time. Do you want to understand why Takahashi Makoto knew? Please thank the universal butler Sebastian for the information provided by the peeping demon. But this kind of thing doesn't matter. What really matters to me is something else." Although Shizukawa asked his assistant to complete a manga draft that he did not belong to, this kind of thing may be difficult for other cartoonists to accept, but Makoto Takahashi doesn't care. On the one hand, the comic draft of Clannad has been completely completed, and the only comic draft that still needs an assistant to complete is only the weekly serialization of Dream Eater. On the other hand, compared to working quietly all the time. As for Mayuri, who was finishing the manga, don't you think that Miss Aoi Ueno, who was playing with the children over there, was even more unprofessional? Although Mayuri's behavior is unreasonable and not worthy of praise, but, people who have been working hard silently should not be criticized either. Hohoen-chan, is there something wrong with those manga manuscripts? Although she realized that her behavior was inappropriate, compared to this, Mayuri was more worried about the manga manuscripts she had completed. Seeing Makoto Takahashi seriously observing the manga drafts he had completed, Mayuri continued to add very nervously and unconfidently, although Shizuka-chan said that the manga drafts completed by Mayuri were more effective than he expected. Even better, but Mayuri thinks this is Shizuka-chan saying to comfort Mayuri. No, this is definitely not comfort. Jing-hee looked at Mayuri's dejected look and immediately retorted, because I couldn't draw that scene well, so I just asked Mayuri for advice. You are just asking for advice. What I didn't expect is Mayuri. Makoto Takahashi, who had been silent since just now, put the manga manuscript in his hand on the table, turned around and picked up the magic sword, leaning against the desk, looking at the nervous man with a wary expression. Mayuri said with a trembling voice, the true identity of the legendary and extremely ferocious night murderer that has been reported in the news during this period, turns out to be you. Killing people at night, Mayuri had never seen such news before. Although her reaction to things other than comics has always been half a beat slow, her reaction speed this time was much faster than usual. Now that I've seen through it, stop trying to disguise it by creating the illusion of being naturally stupid, Mayuri. Makoto Takahashi slowly pulled out the magic sword and tilted his head as he looked at a formidable enemy. Mayuri looked like I don't understand what you're talking about and said passionately, I've been waiting for you since I saw that news. Essay, show off your weapons and let's decide the outcome. Well, girl, no, it should be night murderer. By the way, is there really that news? Jing-hee whispered to Uncle Tintin, who had started to enter the silent observer mode after noticing Takahashi Makoto's strange behavior before. Although I don't insist on watching it every day news and so on, but in my memory, there seems to be no such thing as what the Phoenix Academy teacher just mentioned, right? That kind of news is not mentioned at all. Uncle Ding Ding rolled his eyes and replied in a low voice, this is nonsense. This is definitely the nonsense of Aiken. But speaking of Mr. Jing-hee, what exactly happened just now? What? Just now? To be honest, I'm not very clear. Just now, the teacher from the Phoenix Academy read the manga manuscript that Mayuri helped me complete, and then Jing-hee gently gestured with the famous hand gesture, and said with a grieved face full of black lines, then, it's become what it is now. Comic manuscript. Uncle Ding Ding looked at the comic manuscript on the table with some confusion, then turned to Jing-hee and confirmed, hey, Mr. Jing-hee, why is Cheng like this? Could it be because you were stimulated by something in the comic manuscript? It's not so much that I was stimulated, but it's better to say that through Ruako's manga manuscript, I saw through Mayuri's disguise all along. Before Shizukawa could answer, Takahashi Makoto, who was confronting Mayuri, suddenly spoke. To explain, Ding Ding Jisang, regarding the screen in hell transformation, for someone your age, you should still have a weak memory, right? The screen of hell transformation. Uncle Tintin frowned and was silent for a moment, then asked Makoto Takahashi with some uncertainty, Cheng, what you are talking about, could it be the one that was designed to paint a real hell scene, and the story of the painter who watched his daughter being burned alive, right? But I remember it was just a novel. It's not just novels. Everything that can be passed down and remembered by mankind is what happened in reality, of course, because ordinary people like you cannot travel through the time and space barriers, so for the truth recorded in historical biographies, being skeptical is understandable as a time observer. Although Takahashi Makoto was talking to Uncle Tintin, most of his attention was still focused on Mayuri, so, based on the same principle, Mayuri who can draw the scene of murder and dismemberment. So realistically and delicately, who are you? Uncle Tintin did not interrupt rashly this time, but walked to Mayuri, picked up the comic manuscript on the table and looked through it. Because there were not many comic manuscripts that needed to be observed, Uncle Tintin finished reading it quickly. Unlike famous detectives who like to whet their appetites, Uncle Tintin carefully read the comic manuscript and neatly put it back on the table, and then, how should I put it? Looking at Mayuri's innocent face, and thinking about the comic manuscript he just saw, Uncle Tintin scratched his head in confusion, and seemed to be able to understand Takahashi Makoto's feelings to some extent. Mayuri, who has always been gentle and lovely, when depicting bloody scenes, it is not just the delicate depiction of the picture, but also the matching of the background, and even the scene of blood splattering when the character dies. That kind of expressiveness really makes the film more realistic. As a person who has been in the assistant industry for many years, I feel amazed and ashamed. Uncle Tintin asked himself, if he were responsible for completing these comic manuscripts, he would never be able to reach Mayuri's level. Humph. So Tintin-ji-san, who do you think can draw such an extremely realistic scene? Makoto Takahashi stared at the smiling Mayuri and said word by word, in reality, is it really a natural idiot like Mayuri, instead of a murderer who is active in the darkness and has harvested countless lives? When Mayuri was working on the previous manga draft, the level she showed was just that of an assistant. She only showed an extraordinary level in this manga, which can be explained by talent or something. But if we follow Makoto Takahashi's theory, then a certain middle-class cartoonist who has drawn many comics, shouldn't belong to the category of normal humans, right? This. Ding Ding's eyes were a little erratic. However, can you think that Uncle Ding Ding is courting death by stealing glances at Takahashi Makoto from time to time? Mayuri is Mayuri. How Erhoin-chan's question is so strange. Mayuri tilted her head, pouted and complained softly, and then an innocent smile appeared on her face again. It's Kuma. It's how Erhoin Kuma. Takahashi Makoto stared at Mayuri with anger and roared loudly, I am the crazy cartoonist how Erhoin Kuma. Didn't I say it when you came here before, Mayuri? By the way, Takahashi Makoto, weren't you still entangled in Mayuri's identity issue just now? Why are you jumping to your own title now? Dear readers, I'm sorry to say that I came back almost a little after working last night. I don't know if some big guys will have a brain attack and call me back to work overtime today, so in order to prevent accidents last night, I will upload one chapter first. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 426. In the process of human development and evolution, there is often no shortage of beings called geniuses. Although those so-called geniuses in most cases refer to those highly intelligent beings who can crush mortal bones to death, this is only a one-sided view. The real geniuses are those who are born with those mortal bones. An ability that can only be obtained through a lifetime of hard work. For example, Mayuri's talent in depicting bloody scenes cannot be achieved even by the talented manga artist Shizuka, who can 100% reflect the darkness in his own heart, and even by Shizuka, who has been honing his skills under Makoto Takahashi for a long time. How to draw such a cartoon? There is no doubt that Mayuri is a real genius when it comes to depicting bloody scenes or completing bloody manga manuscripts. Mayuri, who smiles every day, maintains a kind smile to everyone, has a gentle personality and even has an obvious naturally stupid attribute, is actually able to perfectly interpret Jean, in Red Eyes of Red, as the protagonist of The Professional Killers, the darkness and bloodiness that he wants to convey. Should it be said that people cannot be judged by their appearance, or should it be said that all natural cuts are black, or that contrast cuteness is the way of justice? Although nearly a week of observation has proven that Mayuri is a genius who can complete such an excellent manga draft, Makoto Takahashi is not happy or happy at all, because it has been proven that Mayuri is a genius. So it also proves that Mayuri is not what Takahashi Makoto said, the night murderer who is active in the darkness and harvests countless lives. Although she received the title of genius from Makoto Takahashi, Mayuri herself has not changed at all. She still completes the manga draft with a kind smile every day, except for a small amount of Dream Eater that she is given every day. In addition to the manga manuscript of the one, Mayuri is now focusing most of her energy on completing the manga manuscript of Shizuka. Compared to Mayuri, who has always maintained a smile, Miss Aoi Ueno's mood has been a bit, no matter whether she is facing Makoto Takahashi or others on the assistant side, Miss Aoi Ueno has not given a good look. It's not because he had to be responsible for most of the comic manuscripts of Dream Eater in order to test Mayuri's true identity, it's not because Shizuka borrowed Makoto Takahashi's studio to complete his own comic manuscripts, it's not even because she was also an assistant but was assigned manga manuscripts with different weights and felt resentful. The reason why Miss Aoi Ueno became hostile towards Makoto Takahashi and her assistants was naturally because she observed the monthly sales. After that, the comic Clannad started to be serialized and started to take a tragic route. This kind of eyes full of hatred, as well as the disgust that comes from the depths of the soul, and the clear murderous intention that can't help but emanate, tisk, tisk, as expected. The expression of the little animal at this moment is amazing. Gao, as the culprit, Hashi Makoto, when facing Miss Aoi Ueno every day, not only does he not feel guilty or guilty at all, he is actually very happy. Stop it for a while, Chang, looking at Miss Aoi Ueno who kept shrugging her shoulders over there. Uncle Ding Ding sighed helplessly and persuaded you in a neutral manner, although I don't want to interfere with you, Chang, you have some preferences, but you also have to consider Aoi-chan's mood, right? Yada. My familiar cat conspired with the commander to prevent me from going to the base camp on the editorial side of the monthly magazine to gain pleasure, although it makes me very unhappy, considering that there will be opportunities in the future. I can just bear with it for the time being. Takahashi Makoto decisively turned away his head and complained a little depressedly, besides, we are now in the barrier of the fierce demon king of the Phoenix Academy, within the scope of his own territory. He can toy with and torture his subordinates for fun. What's not allowed? By the way, maybe I am too. Looking at Makoto Takahashi's smiling face, Uncle Ding Ding already knew the answer and resigned himself to the shaking his head and sighing mode. I knew it would be like this. Not to mention that I have obtained a lot of pleasure from Tintin Gi-san before. Takahashi Makoto moved his eyes to Miss Aoi Ueno, whose body was trembling over there, and spoke in a tone full of ghosts. He slowly said, now I am very interested in new toys. Well, the little animal's tolerance seems to be a little stronger than yesterday, but it is almost reaching its limit, right? Hi, Makoto Takahashi. Miss Aoi Ueno jumped up from her chair like a stimulated little leopard, roaring angrily. Huh? Little animal, do you have any dissatisfaction? Makoto Takahashi still had a smile on his face, but his next words calmed down the angry Miss Aoi Ueno. Or do you want to experience the evolutionary journey from unicorn beetle to giant needle wasp again like you did before? Humph. After recalling what Takahashi Makoto had done to her before, Miss Aoi Ueno just snorted coldly, then sat down in her seat and continued to complete the manga manuscript she was supposed to finish. This is what Ueno is currently doing. Is this the only way Miss Aoi can express her dissatisfaction with Takahashi Makoto? Don't think that Makoto Takahashi will be merciful because Aoi Ueno is a woman. Judging from Miss Aoi Ueno's observations over the years and her personal experience some time ago, the facts show that Makoto Takahashi treats everyone except Rina and Rin. Not to mention the so-called gentleman's attitude, women sometimes even do some crazy and bad things. For example, the incident that made Miss Aoi Ueno really realize this fact some time ago. Although the entire content of the comic Clannad has been completed, under Makoto Takahashi's friendly persuasion, neither Shizuka nor Uncle Tintin told Miss Aoi Ueno about this matter. Therefore, for Miss Aoi Ueno, The only way to know the next plot of the comic Clannad is to observe the content serialized in the monthly magazine. Then, of course, Miss Aoi Ueno, who had always thought that the manga Clannad would take a gentle route later, discovered the tragedy after observing the serialized manga manuscript. No, it should be said that the fuse that caused the tragedy was lit. With a feeling of joyful expectation and the concept of reading comics full of warmth to heal life, Miss Aoi Ueno has gained a lot from the monthly magazine. The despair and depression, compared to readers who know nothing about it, the mental impact brought by the plot unfolded by the manga god has an extremely damaging effect on Miss Aoi Ueno. Anger can easily make people get carried away, and despair can easily make people lose their minds. Therefore, after Miss Aoi Ueno observed the manga manuscript, her soul was dominated by anger and despair, and she ignored the differences with Makoto Takahashi in all aspects. She not only severely condemned Takahashi Makoto, but also tried to modify the published manga. That irreversible plot. Just the result. What was Yoshida's mood when he was suspended in the air? Miss Aoi Ueno was not present at the time, so she didn't know. However, after being educated in the same way by Makoto Takahashi, maybe Miss Aoi Ueno could be able to do it a little bit. Do you understand something? Oh, because I was busy getting pleasure from the little animals, I almost forgot to mention something important. Makoto Takahashi looked at Shizuo River, who occasionally cast sympathetic glances at Miss Ueno Aoi, with a smile on his face. He made a decision that surprised his assistant, Ruko and Mayuri. From tomorrow on, you don't have to come here. Huh? Why aren't Shizuka-kun and Mayuri-chan here? Miss Aoi Ueno, who still doesn't know that the manga Clannad has been completed, although she is still afraid of a certain middle-class manga artist, can't help it. Asked out loud. Humph, of course we should abandon the existences that have lost their use value, small animals, this is common sense living in the human world, Makoto Takahashi said matter-of-factly. Of course, if Ruko or Mayuri if you don't want to leave, you can try to form a team to complete this special copy of Demon God Phoenix Academy Fear's True Trial. Jinghe River has already known about Takahashi Makoto's decision. No, the correct statement is that Takahashi Makoto not only rejected his proposal to continue being an assistant, but also encouraged himself to embark on the journey of becoming a cartoonist through serialization. Road of Rebellion. By the way, Mayuri was also persuaded by Makoto Takahashi on the grounds that it would be an unforgivable sin to waste Mayuri's talents at will cartoonist Shizuka's assistant. Speaking of which, although he does not understand what happened as well as the person involved, Uncle Tintin, who has a certain amount of life experience, vaguely guessed Takahashi Makoto's intentions after observing the recent behavior of Shizuka and Mayuri. There is no use value. For this reason, Miss Aoi Ueno said she couldn't understand. Although the decision made by Makoto Takahashi had nothing to do with him, he was still a teammate who had completed the manga draft together. Aoi Ueno showed considerable indignation at Makoto Takahashi's sudden decision. Hey, Makoto Takahashi, you. Aoi-chan, you're a man, Mayuri still maintained her usual smile. Not only did she comfort Miss Aoi Ueno who was about to go berserk, but she also shook her head slightly to show that she didn't care. Sister Aoi. Jinghe wanted to take the opportunity to explain to Ueno Aoi, but... Hey, Lyoze, if you break the rules of the game. Takahashi Makoto didn't finish what he said, but the meaning was already obvious. Dear readers, I'm sorry. Something happened at a certain cat's house recently. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist Male. Chapter 427. Ever since that day, Makoto Takahashi drove Shizuka and Mayuri with the excuse of you are no longer of use. Miss Aoi Ueno did not know the reason, or she was motivated by the cruel behavior of a certain middle-class cartoonist. Perhaps he was angry because of the tragedy of the rabbit's death, or because he couldn't bear the tragic plot of the manga Clannad. The day after Shizuka and Mayuri left, he submitted his resignation to Takahashi Makoto, manga artist showing Yoshima assistant this job. What surprised Uncle Tintin was that Makoto Takahashi did not make any attempt to retain Miss Aoi Ueno, nor did he explain all the hidden truths. He simply agreed to Miss Aoi Ueno. Perhaps a middle-class cartoonist seemed to you have already anticipated the situation, so you can be so calm, right? Uncle Tintin originally thought that Takahashi Makoto would explain himself to him after Miss Aoi Ueno left, but Takahashi Makoto was still busy completing the manga drafts that he should have completed every day, and he had no intention of explaining at all. Alas. I mean Cheng. Uncle Tintin tried to vent the depression caused by the silent environment through a long sigh, but the visual effect was not very good. At least Takahashi Makoto, who was painting, did not act like Uncle Tintin paid no attention to himself as expected, but focused all his energy on the comic manuscript to be completed. Is this really good? Although the workload has indeed increased a lot compared to before, but complaining, Uncle Tintin has passed the age of acting like a spoiled brat. The reason for raising such a question is not only because the work environment has become depressing recently, but more importantly, Uncle Ding Ding can no longer bear it. Although compared to animation, the performance in comics is indeed lacking, but Makoto Takahashi quickly waved the brush in his hand and said excitedly, "Humph. This super electromagnetic force that penetrates the sky, the gun, isn't it also very gorgeous? Then, let's do it again. Ola 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 ola. Forget it, Uncle Tintin, who was being ignored, looked at Makoto Takahashi, who was clearly in an excited state over there, and decisively chose to swallow the words that came to his lips, and continued to work with his head down as if resigned to his fate. Speaking of which, it's just a manga draft. Makoto Takahashi, do you need to activate the Hokyutoryu battle preparation mode? Although there is only Uncle Tintin left among the assistants at this stage, the comic draft of Clannad has been completed. The only comic draft that really needs to be completed is Dream Eater, which is still serialized in the weekly. What's more, judging from the speed at which Makoto Takahashi completes the manga manuscript, let alone Uncle Tintin as an assistant, even if Makoto Takahashi is left alone, he will definitely be able to complete the manga manuscript before the weekly deadline. Of course, this is not good news for Uncle Tintin. 1 second, he was finishing the comic draft with a concentrated attitude that no one else could bear to disturb. The next second, he was wielding the magic sword and performing high-speed slashes while saying puzzling words or making disturbing noises. Trembling mad laughter, ahem, in short, since the assistant side has been significantly reduced in staff, putting aside the depressing and sad thing of the number of comic manuscripts that need to be completed has increased significantly, Uncle Tintin said that he is alone when facing Makoto Takahashi. He felt quite insecure. Although only Makoto Takahashi and Uncle Tintin are left, for the only remaining weekly serial comic Dream Eater, the number of comic manuscripts that need to be completed and handed over to Yoshida every week is less than before. It's not a very heavy job. At least Uncle Tintin no longer has to work from morning to night drawing cartoons like he did some time ago. Although there is nothing wrong with thinking this way, but Uncle Tintin seems to underestimate Takahashi Makoto. The mood has not been affected by the large departure of assistants, and the number of comic drafts completed by a certain second-grade cartoonist has not decreased. No, the correct statement should be that with the number of toys for Takahashi Makoto to obtain pleasure reduced, a certain middle-level cartoonist was able to concentrate on completing the comic manuscripts, but the number of completed comic manuscripts increased a lot. Yoshi, the mission is accomplished. Putting down the brush and taking out his mobile phone, Makoto Takahashi was still in the habit of having a mysterious phone call with unknown existence after completing the comic draft. According to the plan, what is to be done next? The thing is, well, as the Snake Apostle, of course I know, yes, all this is for the great leader. El Psychongru. I mean Cheng. After watching Makoto Takahashi put down the phone, Uncle Tintin brought up the previous topic again. about Shizugawa-kun and Mayuri-chan, aren't you going to explain it to Aoi-chan? Although I don't know what your plans are for Cheng's delay in explaining to Aoi-chan, but even if you don't explain, Jing-hee-kun will tell Aoi-chan sooner or later. Well, if the script develops like this, it would be quite interesting. Makoto Takahashi flipped through the manga manuscripts on the table and said expectantly, the gears of fate have begun to turn, and the relationship between boys and girls, the threads of fate are entangled like a spiral. All of this is indeed the choice of the door of destiny. Although he didn't understand what Makoto Takahashi was talking about, Uncle Tintin could feel that whether it was Shizukawa and Mayuri who were nominally forced to leave, or Aoi Ueno who later left voluntarily, it seemed that the assistant's reaction to leaving the three people was different. In the calculation of a certain second-grade cartoonist, and looking at Makoto Takahashi's devilish smile and the look of expectation on his face, Uncle Tintin felt somewhat sympathetic to the three colleagues who had left. A person who is good at drawing bloody and brutal scenes, and a person who can reflect the darkness of the heart through comics, this combination is perfect. According to the practice of increase in favorability comes from daily life, Ryuko is working with Mayuri to complete the comics during the drafting process. Due to long-term cooperation, a tacit understanding that others cannot understand will arise in the mutual collaboration, so some wonderful changes may occur between the two former assistants. Gao Qiaocheng took out an unused piece of manuscript paper, and after casually smearing the two primary school students' favorite stickman images on the paper, he further explained to Uncle Tintin, whose mouth began to twitch, and the most fortunate thing is, Ryuko and Mayuri have different genders, so they avoid the same mistake as a Jumumenha who embarked on the branch line of both a cartoonist and a gay friend. Instead, they began to move towards the little sea otter, who was both a winner in life and a gay friend. Toy Shao branch line forward. That is to say, Cheng, do you want to bring Shizugawa-kun and Mayuri-chan together? Makoto Takahashi only roughly described his plan, but Uncle Tintin had already understood the ultimate goal of a certain middle-class cartoonist. Should I say that he is worthy of being the assistant to manga artist Hohoin Kuma? Matching up, tisk, Tintin Gi-san, what a vulgar statement. Makoto Takahashi looked at Uncle Tintin with disgust, frowned and corrected his statement. This is to implement the righteousness of love and healing. What a special aid action. Yes, is that so? Why do I feel that the fire of gossip in your body is burning? Cheng, inconsistency is a god-level skill that adults must master, especially someone like Uncle Tintin. An assistant who works for a middle-class cartoonist. In order to fill the whole world with love and healing, in order to recorrect the distorted and even wrong concepts of human beings, I, the Phoenix Academy, really threw myself into the body-eating snake led by the alliance leader. Gao Qiaocheng completely ignored Uncle Tintin's confused and ignorant look, and began to explain his reasons for joining the association, and this incident of Lyoza, although it seems that Lyoza just wants to follow us, and embark on the path called rebellion, the thorny road of the leader, but, in fact, this is just an experiment to verify whether the human transformation plan proposed by our Phoenix Academy to the Great Alliance leader has made breakthrough progress. Uncle Ding Ding doesn't want to hear any more. Putting aside the important question of whether you can understand it, Uncle Tintin is very worried now. He is worried that Takahashi Makoto, who is emotional at the moment, will torment himself with the excuse of you know too much. Although they will definitely not be subjected to assassination or execution, but, being suspended in the air like insect chrysalises like Yoshida and Ueno Aoi before is also an unbearable treatment. So, it's time to change the subject. Then Aoi-chan, to be honest, it's not that Uncle Ding Ding is not proficient in changing the subject, but the prehistoric spirit in your body, no, the soul of gossip has also begun to burn, right? Good question. Makoto Takahashi showed a proud smile on his face, and happily described his great blueprint to Uncle Tintin, who was obviously showing off. I don't want to hear it anymore. After the little animal ran away in anger, I will definitely go to Lyoza to question the truth, and after discovering the hidden truth, Whitewashing can greatly increase my favorability. Then. Wait. If it really develops like this, then Aoi-chan, you. Uncle Tintin looked at Makoto Takahashi with a puzzled expression. Aren't you worried that Rina-chan will chop you into pieces and feed it to the dogs? So the next step is the key to the plan. Makoto Takahashi ignored Uncle Tintin's vicious curse and continued to explain in an orderly manner, and then when the guilty little animal comes to the door, I will mentally and physically the best candidate for the job of physically attacking her with an extremely effective double attack, and then comforting and curing the injured animal was, of course, Lyoza, who rushed here after receiving the notice. Lyoza will be forced to start the plot. Root of small animal line, there should be no need to analyze the following things, right? That is to say. At this moment, Uncle Ding Ding already felt a little sympathy for the unsuspecting Jing He. In order to prevent getting lost in the future, I kindly helped Lyoza solve his worries, so that Lyoza could calm down and complete the comics, and dance with us on the gorgeous stage as a cartoonist. Isn't it said that behind every successful man, there should be a successful woman? If there are two women, the effect should be doubled. Makoto Takahashi pinched his chin, with a look of anticipation on his face. But will Lyoza successfully open the Crystal Palace to fly in the end, or will he receive the special treatment of being cut in half by Hatayo Hokwon? I'm really looking forward to it. Uncle Ding Ding, please stop looking at Takahashi Makoto with that expectant look of when will this devilish guy be punished by God, without awakening the magic eyes. You cannot see the death line or fate of Takahashi Makoto, and you cannot predict the future of a certain Chuyunibu manga artist. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist. Chapter 428. After the object of Makoto Takahashi's pleasure is transferred from the reader side to the assistant side, it may be a fortunate thing for the reader side, but for the assistant side people, it is not a happy thing. Not to mention the three assistants who have left, Uncle Tintin is the only remaining assistant. Although after hearing Takahashi Makoto's wicked plan, he was very happy that he was not the next victim, but Uncle Tintin, the rest of the assistants have fallen into a man-made disaster created by a certain middle-class cartoonist. Do you think you, the assistant, can be spared? After hearing Makoto Takahashi's plan, Uncle Tintin originally planned to pack up his things and go home. However, looking at Makoto Takahashi, who was full of expectations just now, he now has a very troubled look on his face. This time Uncle Ding Ding learned his lesson and did not ask rashly, nor did he have any intention of trying to find out what Takahashi Makoto was thinking. Uncle Ding Ding's intuition told him that if he rashly spoke to the troubled Takahashi Makoto at this moment, he would say maybe, no, I will definitely encounter something super troublesome. But, Uncle Tintin, it's understandable that you don't want to cause trouble for yourself, but running away will only lead to more troublesome problems. If you are a man, you should face all troubles and difficulties head on. But now there is a problem that needs to be solved. Makoto Takahashi picked up a stack of comic manuscripts from the table, and then took out another stack of comic manuscripts from the drawer, and said to Uncle Tintin with a troubled expression, "Hey, Tintin-ji-san, which one do you think should be serialized after Clannad ends?" Look. Escape or something. Sometimes you desperately want to escape, but you will encounter a more troublesome problem. One comic was created with the King of Black Flame in the name of Shinkai Makoto, and the other comic was specially created to mock a certain Ji-san. Because the assistant's combat power has dropped significantly, I can only choose from them. A serial. Makoto Takahashi showed a look of regret on his face, but his eyes were fixed on Uncle Tintin. Although we can now summon all the assistants back, I really want to see Lucy I Love and Shura Fields in youthful life. So Tintin-ji-san, which one do you think is suitable for serialization? Uh, this. To be honest, Uncle Tintin said he didn't want to answer this question at all. Because at this moment, Uncle Tintin has understood from Makoto Takahashi's words that after the comic Clannad, Makoto Takahashi will start a new serialization, so no matter which comic you choose, you have just relaxed from the assistant job for a while, and it's obviously going to be busy again. And the worst thing is that now he is the only one left on the assistant side. Same as my beloved cat, as expected, Tintin-ji-san, it's hard for you to make a choice. Makoto Takahashi looked at Uncle Tintin's troubled expression and shook his head dejectedly. It seems you can only close it. My eyes are drawn. Catch, draw lots? Isn't this not good? Although he really wanted to complain about Takahashi Makoto's casual behavior, Uncle Tintin can still somewhat understand the superficial truth of you can't have your cake and eat it too of. Although he really wants to say that he should not choose any of them, Uncle Tintin said that he is facing Makoto Takahashi alone now, and he really lacks the courage and strength to say such a thing, and he is the only one left on the assistant side. Come on, there's not even anyone to collect the bodies. As for whether the selected comics can be serialized, Uncle Tintin doesn't need to worry at all. A certain middle-class cartoonist with the title of Monster Cartoonist, it is said that only one of the comics he has created so far was rejected by a weekly magazine for serialization due to thematic issues. And speaking of this difficult choice, what is there to worry about? If those cartoonists who can't think of new comics know that you are troubled by Takahashi Makoto not knowing which comic to choose for serialization, they will definitely fight you. Close your eyes and draw out the manga manuscript, and serialize whatever you draw. Those who are selected should not be proud and complacent, and those who are not selected should not feel inferior and regretful. No matter what the outcome is, don't hate each other. Just when Uncle Tintin was wandering, Gao Makoto Takahashi was mumbling to himself as he began, "Why does it feel like Makoto Takahashi is selecting contestants? Oh, this feeling, The decision is yours." Alas. Uncle Ding Ding, who had clearly foreseen that his workload would increase in the next period of time, let out a helpless sigh and felt melancholy. "Let me see which one it is." Takahashi Makoto gently raised the comic manuscript in his hand, and sighed sympathetically towards Uncle Tintin, who had a lifeless expression on his face. "The result, this is the decision. All of this, is indeed the choice of destiny. This, shouldn't be counted, right?" Uncle Ding Ding smiled bitterly and carefully made a suggestion to Takahashi-chan. "Chan, how about you do it again?" "Yada. Yada." Makoto Takahashi shook his head decisively and refused, while excitedly repeating words such as "this is the choice of Steins Gate." But Cheng. Although Takahashi-chan obviously rejected his well-intentioned proposal, Uncle Ding Ding was not discouraged. Instead, he patiently persuaded Takahashi-chan again, "The weekly magazine is still serializing Dream Eater. If we start 2 new comics at the same time, maybe there will be some time constraints. Even Chan, you can't finish it within the specified time, right? A real man. Comics are the product of the soul." Takahashi-chan patted his chest and made a bold statement, "As long as this place is strong enough, as long as it is still burning with unyielding and unwillingness, even if we fall countless times, we can still stand up. Even if we are so tired that we are about to vomit blood, we will not stop drawing comics." Hey, Chen, your passionate words seem to be in the wrong place, right? Why do I sound not moved at all? But Uncle Ding Ding interrupted Takahashi Makoto with a wry smile, "It makes me feel that the future, which was already dark enough, is now obviously full of despair and sadness." The reason why Uncle Ding Ding reacted so strongly is very simple, and it is naturally due to the result of Takahashi Makoto's drawing of lots just now. The 2 comics were mixed together, and he closed his eyes and drew a comic to decide the comic to be serialized. This method of supervision sounds completely free of cheating, But what Uncle Ding Ding never expected was that the comics selected by Takahashi Makoto were actually 2 pages of comics stuck together. And these 2 pages of comics, what the hell is that they belong to 2 comics? Then, Takahashi Makoto decided to serialize the 2 comics at the same time after the completion of Clannad. Although Takahashi Makoto also had a glorious history of serializing multiple comics at the same time, you have to know that the assistant side was full of combat power at that time. However, now, Miss Ueno Aoi is running away in anger. It is estimated that in the short term, no, if it is based on Takahashi Makoto's plan full of evil taste, she will not come back for a long time. Based on the same reason, Shizukawa and Mayuri are naturally out of hope. So, it still doesn't work. As the only remaining assistant, Uncle Ding Ding knows very well that it is impossible to complete the simultaneous serialization of 3 comics, which sounds quite sci-fi, with only himself and Takahashi Makoto, not to mention that 2 of them are serialized in monthly magazines at the same time. Man. Ding Ding Ji-san, I will double your commission. Takahashi Makoto decisively gave Uncle Ding Ding a death flag. Think about your newborn baby, your wife waiting at home, and the mortgage and car loan you need to pay. Don't you want your child to have a carefree childhood? Don't you want your wife to have a well-fed family? Don't you want to relieve the mental pressure caused by real-life problems such as car loans and mortgages? Ji-san, who gets double the reward, for your child, your wife, and the happy life you long for, if you are a man, don't refuse. Isn't it that men should grit their teeth and use it to provoke the pressure of life? From the coercion of spiritual encouragement to the current inducement of longing for a happy life, it has even been elevated to the height of man's dignity. God knows how Takahashi Makoto's brain circuit is composed, but one thing is certain. Uncle Ding Ding has already shown signs of being persuaded. And we have some pretty powerful reinforcements. Makoto Takahashi pulled out the manuscript of one of the comics and handed it to Uncle Ding Ding with a smile. The author of this comic is not the cartoonist Feng Guangai Yuan Kima, but the long-lost Makoto Shinkai on the reader's side. Makoto Shinkai, after Uncle Ding Ding took the manuscript, he flipped through it casually, and a look of realization appeared on his face. In other words, this comic was completed by you, Cheng, and teacher Nazuma. Of course. And the King of Black Flame seems to be unexpectedly powerful this time. Makoto Takahashi turned the manuscript in Uncle Ding Ding's hand to the front, pointed to the opening content and said slowly, the front part of this comic, the King of Black Flame, has already been completed. We are only responsible for the content about Misaka Mikoto, which is relatively late, judging from the current time in the human world. It is estimated that the serialization of the content we have completed here will start at least half a year later. Is that so? Uncle Ding Ding's shaken heart is already very obvious. According to Makoto Takahashi, the only comics that need to be completed now are Dream Eater, which is being serialized in the weekly magazine, and the comic that he has not yet observed. If it is just to complete the dual serialization of the weekly and monthly magazines, then it should be possible for only myself and Aiken to work hard, right? And Ding Ding Ji-san, this new comic may be unexpectedly compatible with you. Makoto Takahashi picked up the comic manuscript of another comic, and a smile appeared on his face. After all, among the assistants, the only person who has completed the second-level job transfer task in Life Game, I guess you are the only one. Eh? That is to say. Uncle Ding Ding's heart moved, and he immediately picked up the comic manuscript on the table and quickly flipped through it. Sigh, since the stage has been set. Makoto Takahashi ignored the man who was flipping through the comic manuscript, took out his mobile phone from his white coat pocket, and skillfully and quickly dialed a call. Let's fight to our heart's content for the next period of time. Before the other party could speak, Takahashi Makoto said with high morale, Ryoko, no, manga artist Shizuke Gawaryu. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 429. At the beginning, Yoshida publicly stated in the monthly editorial headquarters that the manga Clannad would end with a happy ending. However, judging from the current serialization of Clannad, let alone a happy ending, this is definitely going to be a rhythm of torture to death. The privilege of being an editor is to be able to observe the manga draft before the readers, especially a popular manga like Clannad. Although the plot of Clannad has obviously developed towards a tragic route in recent times, it has to be said that the bad nature of human beings has been tortured to death. They keep saying things like I will resolutely boycott Clannad if the plot is not changed and I never want to read Clannad again in the future, but when Yoshida brings a new manga draft, they instantly abandon their moral integrity and gather together to observe again. Of course, for Yoshida, who had already observed all the contents of the comic Clannad, when he saw his colleagues on the editorial side start to wail with tears one after another, he pretended to be united in hatred of the enemy, but he was already very proud in his heart. How could the petty Yoshida forget the fact that his colleagues complained and besieged him because of the ending of the comic Clannad? Deliberately concealing the next content of Clannad from his colleagues, watching everyone being tortured to death by the plot of the comic Clannad, and then silently observing his colleagues being healed by the ending in the future. Finally, at this time, Yoshida understood what kind of pleasure Makoto Takahashi had been pursuing before. However, looking at the history of human development, anyone who gets carried away by success will eventually have a bad end. Therefore, Yoshida, who was still very happy in the editorial side some time ago, was slapped from the peak of happiness and joy to the bottom in an instant when he arrived at Makoto Takahashi's place and faced all kinds of problems that came his way. Hey! Did I hear correctly? Yoshida's eyes moved from the three comics on the table to the three cartoonists sitting in different positions opposite him, and a very distressed look appeared on his face. Ah-Cheng, you mean you? Oh my cat, don't show such an unbelievable look. Didn't you hear it clearly just now? Takahashi Makoto squatted on the sofa, throwing sugar cubes in his hand into the coffee, and said confidently, besides, what's so surprising about this kind of thing? As the pawns of the two major organizations, didn't you already have some information before? Now you deliberately pretend to be surprised. You want us to lower our guard, right? Oh. So that's what you said. Hearing this, Nyizuma Eiji jumped from the sofa to the table, stretched out his hands, and took several drinks with straws into his arms. While sipping secret drink of Takahashi Makoto /U0026 Sebastian, he smiled at Yoshida. Compared to the stupid editor Yujiro-san, whether in terms of strategy or black-bellied in terms of degree, they are much stronger. Should I say that Yoshida-san is worthy of being the editor-in-chief of Fengguangai Yuan Teacher? I'm very sorry, Mr. Yoshida. Looking at Yoshida, who was about to go berserk by a certain Chuyuni cartoonist and a certain problem cartoonist, Shizukawa, the only one who kept sitting upright, apologized sincerely, although I also know that such a request is too unreasonable, but Mr. Yoshida, if it is possible. Of course there is no problem with your side, Shizuka-kun, but... Yoshida's favorability towards Shizukawa instantly increased a lot, and then turned to look at the evil cartoonist duo named the culprit next to him, and his tone became a little unfriendly. By the way, it's not impossible for you two to serialize new comics, but why choose the same time? Didn't I say it before? Takahashi Makoto looked at Yoshida helplessly, turned his head and looked at Nyizuma Eiji, and added very tacitly, of course it is to realize our great wish of breaking the void. Break your sister. A cartoonist can break the void by drawing a cartoon? It's not like a certain dual king who can save the world by playing cards. If Yoshida knew that Master Huang, the president, and Wang Yang were there, he would definitely complain like this, right? Hee. Jinghe River, who knew exactly what breaking the void was, just looked at the expression on Yoshida's face and knew that Yoshida's heart was broken at the moment. At this time, the only thing you can do is smile, right? So, is it not possible? Curled up, with both hands on his chest like cat paws, blinking his eyes non-stop, Makoto Takahashi and Eiji Nizuma asked Yoshida in unison, and did not forget to jointly perform an extremely brutal combination of combat skills. No. No, Yoshida, who was attacked, almost entered the near-death state. As expected, the power and effect of the combination combat skills are outstanding. Manga artist Hao Winkuma, manga artist Shizukawa, and manga artist Makoto Shinkai plan to serialize new manga in the monthly magazine after the manga Clannad is finished. For a monthly magazine that lacks manga works, having a new manga serialization is a happy thing. But the question is, what the hell is it that 3 new serializations are serialized at the same time? Do you want to turn the monthly magazine into a battlefield? Although Yoshida said this, his eyes were fixed on Takahashi Makoto. There is no doubt that the person who instigated Shizukawa and Nizuma Eiji is definitely the person behind the scenes. A middle school cartoonist in a white coat. Battlefield? After Takahashi Cheng lowered his head and pondered for a moment, he suddenly seemed to remember something and turned to his new wife Eiji and shouted loudly, "Oops! Regarding the big fight we started in the monthly magazine, I forgot to tell my good friends Yachin Mumenjai. Phoenix and teacher, you are a man." Eiji, the new wife, took out his mobile phone, showed the call records to Takahashi Makoto, and said with a smile as if he was showing off and claiming credit, "I have already told teacher Kamiha Aho before. After Clannad is finished in the monthly magazine, the cartoonist Makoto Shinkai will start a new series in the monthly magazine." "Oh, thank you for your help, King of Black Flame." After hearing Nizumai's words, Takahashi Makoto looked much more relaxed. He turned to look at Yoshida, who was completely speechless, and said with a smile, "Hey, my beloved cat, this is basically the situation." "What do you mean this is basically the situation?" After Yoshida finished his rant, he looked at the 3 cartoonists across from him whose expressions had not changed at all. He sighed helplessly and switched from the protest and argument route to Huero persuasion line, "And even if your 3 comics are submitted to the serialization conference at the same time, they may not all be serialized at the same time. Don't forget that there are other cartoonists' works in the monthly magazine that are also being serialized. Yeah. The number of new serials is limited." Didn't the commander say that as long as the comics are interesting, they can be serialized?" Makoto Takahashi looked at Yoshida with a puzzled face, then turned to accomplice Nizuma Eiji and confirmed, "Hey, Black Flame King, I remember you must have heard this too." Of course, Nizuma Eiji looked at Yoshida with a sad expression and continued to hit him, "Whether it's Mr. Shizukawa's comic Jean, or Makoto Shinkai's comic Electromagnetic Gun, or Mr. Phoenix Academy Soon. I just finished an episode before. Hey! King of Black Flame, haven't you seen that my beloved cat is still confused and hesitant?" Makoto Takahashi suddenly interrupted Shinzuma Eiji's words. "Ryoko and Shinkai Makoto's comics, my cat has already known about it, so it doesn't matter, but before my cat agrees to submit the comic to the serialization meeting, it is forbidden to reveal any relevant information. It won't be that style of manga again, right?" Yoshida suddenly had black lines on his face after thinking of a manga that Makoto Takahashi had previously banned from being published, no, by the former editor-in-chief of the magazine. Ahem. After listening to Mr. Phoenix Academy narrating most of the plot, I felt that my life had been redeemed. To be able to draw such a healing comic deserves to be said to be the Phoenix who completed the Clannad comic. Teacher Yin? After a slight cough, Takahashi Makoto said this with a serious face. Looking at Yoshida's demented look, Takahashi Makoto continued, "This is the King of Black Flame. After reading the first chapter of the comic and listening to the general plot content, my evaluation, so my familiar cat, I am completely honest this time." Yoshida rolled his dead eyes and looked at Takahashi Makoto. After a brief silence, he asked expressionlessly, "I mean, Chen, you can calmly say other people's praises for your comics, don't you? Do you feel ashamed or embarrassed?" "Of course not, I'm just stating the facts. Now, my familiar cat, actually at the beginning, I didn't plan to start a new serial in the monthly magazine. But Takahashi Makoto quoted from the statement. Yoshida's eyes glared. Who do you believe this? But a certain middle school student completely ignored Yoshida's unbreakable eyes, got up and walked to Shiji River, who had been silent since the beginning, and slapped a certain boy on the shoulder. But I want to confirm the growth of Lyoza. You must know that a Guilman may evolve into Zamigramon by mistake, so if you don't pay attention to it, Lyoza's future may become very serious. Oops. Hey, Ryoko, do you see that my cat is starting to waver? Say something. By the way, my cat's weakness is said to be at the back of its neck. Although Yoshida wanted to complain about Makoto Takahashi at the moment, looking at Shizuka, who clearly had something to say, Yoshida chose to remain silent, but by the way, he raised his death glare towards Makoto Takahashi. Power. Mr. Yoshida, if it's possible, I hope you can promise Teacher Phoenix Academy, although at the beginning, Jinghei's speech was still a bit stammering, but later it became smoother. Visual inspection origin. Are you awake yet? I know that my current level may not be enough. I also know that the comic genre alone cannot surpass the comic Clannad currently being serialized by Phoenix Institute Teacher. I also know that neither Phoenix Institute Teacher nor Nizuma AG Teacher, they are not cartoonists that I can compete with now. But despite this, I still want to give it a try. Challenge the teacher from the Phoenix Institute, challenge the teacher AG Shinzuma, and challenge the two teachers who are the pseudonyms of the cartoonists I admire, Shinkai Makoto. It's not to verify how much my cartooning skills have improved, nor to try to take this opportunity to become famous. I just want to let Mr. Feng Guangai Yuan see. As a disciple, I plan to become a cartoonist. I have the consciousness of Jinghei River. The unit organized a football match, and then a certain cat was selected to score a goal and assist a goal, which is a cause for celebration. The problem is that I haven't had such intense exercise for a long time, and I had various intense reactions after the game. Alas, I'm sorry to say that there have been a lot of things happening recently, so I won't complain to you readers and spread negative energy. You all should rest early. I'm going to eat something. That's all. Good night. D. Be a middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do SD Mao. Chapter 430. Although it is not uncommon to submit 3 new comics to the monthly serialization meeting at the same time, but observing the previous serialization meetings of the monthly magazine, it has never happened that 3 new comics were approved to be serialized at the same meeting. Although the monthly magazine is currently lacking in comics, it is not necessary to start serializing 3 new comics at the same time. Originally, Yoshida planned to say this. Originally, Yoshida planned to reveal this situation to the 3 cartoonists to reduce the possibility of 3 comics being serialized in the monthly magazine at the same time. However, Shizukawa's sudden passionate words made Yoshida, who was originally planning to explain the situation, hesitate. At this time, should I refuse? From the perspective of the monthly magazine, what will happen if 3 new comics are published at the same time, not to mention other comics that are being serialized, compared with the comic artists Hao Winkuma and Shinkai Makoto, who have already had a certain influence on the readers? The comic artist Shizukawa is just a newcomer who is short-lived, and the 3 comics are in a brutal fight at the beginning. This obviously unreasonable arrangement will definitely cause controversy. But, if I refuse? Looking at Shizukawa's serious expression, Yoshida couldn't bear to say no, and could only stare at Takahashi Makoto with angry eyes. Yoshida, do you want to use the power of Zero Treasure to eliminate Takahashi Makoto's existence? So, Yoshida kept staring at Takahashi Makoto. If Takahashi Makoto hadn't made this suggestion, if only Shizukawa's Zan and Shinkai Makoto's Electric Gun were serialized, if there were only 2 new comics serialized in the monthly magazine, Yoshida would definitely agree very readily. This matter needs to be decided by the editor-in-chief. My beloved cat, you just need to submit the 3 comics to the serialization meeting. Takahashi Makoto said with a smile while wiping the magic sword, let me and the commander solve the negotiation and communication privately. Looking at Takahashi Makoto's actions, Yoshida began to worry about the editor-in-chief of the monthly magazine, Sasaki-sama. Oh, my beloved cat, it seems that you have objections. Takahashi Makoto gently waved the magic sword, a real man. I will not restrict your speech, my beloved cat, at most, I will just let you know the truth that a man's blood should not be shed lightly. So, in the end, Yoshida agreed to submit 3 new serialized comics at the serialization meeting where the comic Clannad was completed. Of course, in addition to the above reasons, the important thing is, the smile on Takahashi Makoto's face that my beloved cat, if you don't agree, you can't walk out of this door today is too dangerous for Yoshida. The only thing to be thankful for is that the manga Clannad is still being serialized, and it is estimated that there is still some time before it is completed, so Yoshida can take advantage of this free time to convey Takahashi Makoto's plan to the editor-in-chief, and also think about how to persuade Takahashi Makoto. In short, taking advantage of the great opportunity that the manga Clannad has not yet been completed and the 3 new series have not yet started, thinking about the next response strategy is Yoshida's current primary goal. But what makes Yoshida a little entangled is that no matter how he begs and coerces, no matter how he persuades, Takahashi Makoto has never let him read the new manga signed by Haoru Kuma from beginning to end. The only information he can get about the new serialized manga is just this is a very healing manga. It will be tragic if too much information is revealed. In response to Yoshida's questioning, Takahashi Makoto always replied like this, the specific content cannot be revealed, and of course the plot direction cannot be told. The only thing I can tell you, my cat, is, well, I think about how to perfunctory you. Hey. Deliberate, right? Takahashi Makoto, you just exposed your true thoughts on purpose, didn't you? Well, since you, my cat, have been quite obedient recently, I'll give you a little hint. Takahashi Makoto certainly won't have a change of heart and tell Yoshida about the contents of the comics, deliberately revealing something to whet people's appetites, etc. This is the most skilled method of a certain middle school cartoonist. This comic is the same as Dream Eaters, and the inspiration for creation comes from real life. Same as Dream Eaters, Yoshida looked at Takahashi Makoto with some surprise, and after thinking for a moment, his face was full of black lines. It can't be a comic about the daily life of a certain tragic editor-in-chief? It's a tragic editor-in-chief who is bullied by his own cartoonists or novelists. Ahem, speaking of Yoshida, how much psychological shadow has Takahashi Makoto brought to you? Why did you think of this at the first time? Hey, my cat, didn't you appear in your true colors in Dream Eaters? Takahashi Makoto showed a look of contempt after hearing Yoshida's words. People should learn to be content, otherwise their souls will wander in hell forever after death. After all, greed is one of the 7 deadly sins. Huh? My image in Dream Eater, is it considered a true performance? When Yoshida mentioned this, he seemed to be quite angry. He took out a weekly magazine from his bag at a very fast speed and turned to the comic Dream Eater. He pointed at his cartoon image and yelled and complained at Makoto. Takahashi, stop joking. How can I be so evil? The real evil person is you, Chang Cartoonist Phoenix Academy, you are the right one. Eh? But after the little sea otter finished reading this chapter of the manga, he called me and told me that my companion cat in Dream Eaters is exactly the same as in reality. Makoto Takahashi wanted to increase his persuasion. At the same time, he took out his mobile phone and showed the call history to Yoshida. By the way, it's not just the little sea otter, but also the good friends Aiken Mumenjai and the Black Flame King. Oh, by the way, even Fukuda, the silver-haired guy who doesn't have many contacts with you, said that the most outstanding character in Dream Eaters is my beloved Katyu. At this time, should I say thank you? Yoshida gritted his teeth and looked at the second-year cartoonist in front of him, who used cartoons to promote his reputation as a villain, although his cartoon image was well received by cartoonists, but Yoshida said that he really couldn't be happy. You're welcome. After all, you are my subordinate cat, Makoto Takahashi said with an expression on his face as if he was discovered by you when he did good deeds, scratching his head. Hey! What does the success of comic characters have to do with me? Regarding Makoto Takahashi's shameless and immoral behavior, Yoshida decisively chose to use the tsundere mode to change the topic, although I'm happy to say that, but what I'm most concerned about now is the new comic. Chen, you have been saying before that it will be a healing comic. This kind of statement makes me very concerned. My beloved cat, I draw healing comics, what do you need to care about? Makoto Takahashi naturally heard the implication of Yoshida's words, stared at Yoshida angrily, and retorted loudly, don't forget, as a cartoonist Phoenix Inferno exists, but he also has the hidden identity of Messenger of Love and Healing. Think about the comics I have completed before, aren't they all full of love and healing? For example, Steel Refining or something like that. The crying ending at the end of Rebellion Zero, Requiem. Crayon Shin-chan has a laugh-out-loud opening chapter but a rather deceptive ending. Madoka begins under the guise of magical girl protecting the world, and ends with endless despair and sadness. There are also 3 monster comics, the last of which made many readers cry. What the hell is love and healing? It's just despair and depression. After briefly recalling the comics serialized by Makoto Takahashi, Yoshida immediately showed a look of despair on his face, and, Cheng, what you just said, humph. Cheng has the nerve to mention Steel. Now go to the street and ask a random reader who has read Steel to ask them about their impressions of this comic. Do you remember the happy ending more deeply, or do you remember Nina's previous plot that deceived people more deeply? Hey, my beloved cat, have you forgotten something? For example, Clannad, such as Clannad, and another example, Clannad. Makoto Takahashi tried his best to refute Yoshida's slander. Huh, Clannad? Yoshida seemed even more resentful when he mentioned this. Yes, judging from the final result, this comic is indeed a healing style that is rare among the comics created by you, Cheng. But Cheng, do you know that before the finale came out, your comic was regarded as the most sadistic comic in the past 5 years by readers? By the way, is there really such a comment? How come I've never heard of it? Makoto Takahashi looked at Yoshida in astonishment, his eyes twinkling with doubt. Speaking of my dependent cat, this kind of thing, could it be that he was talking nonsense on the spot? Of course not. Speaking of Yoshida, what about your I'm going to defy heaven this time momentum just now? Oh, by the way, my familiar cat, I would like to correct what I said before. Makoto Takahashi did not delve into Yoshida's superficial lie, but changed the topic on his own. What about the real creativity of that manga? Actually, it comes from a very famous historical figure. Huh? Historical figure, tisk. Hearing what you say, I'm getting more and more worried. Continue to be confused, Mr. Yoshida. In short, the plot of this comic is quite healing. Makoto Takahashi seemed to have thought of something, with an expectant smile on his face, but I guess after reading it, a certain Jisang will kill him regardless of the difference in strength. Come to your door? That's really exciting. Ha 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 ha. Makoto Takahashi is not wrong. That manga is indeed a very healing manga. At most, it is just a bit confusing at the end, but with this opportunity to gain massive pleasure, Makoto Takahashi will suddenly have a conscience. Tell Yoshida where you found it? The hint of the new comic is already very obvious. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, MaleProtagonist email. Chapter 431. Although Makoto Takahashi is about to add a new monthly series while serializing the manga Dream Eaters, Uncle Tintin does not feel the change in workload. He only needs to complete the manga draft of Dream Eaters every week, because all the new manga drafts required for the monthly magazine are completed by Makoto Takahashi alone. Observation is no problem, but help? Of course not. If you, Tintin-ji-san, accidentally remember the plot of the manga, and accidentally reveal it to my cat, I will definitely accidentally implement heavenly punishment on you. Although Uncle Tintin asked Makoto Takahashi for help after completing his work, he was rejected by Makoto Takahashi with such a weird reason. Of course, if you, Ding-Ding-ji-san, have no desire to live and want to drag my cats to their deaths, actually, there is no need to go around in circles like this, just tell me directly. Don't think that cartoonists are just people who stay at home and work all day. I have a lot of connections in the underworld. So I can easily help you get one-way ticket to hell. So Uncle Ding Ding decisively chose not to ask about the comic manuscripts. For Makoto Takahashi, who has completed the Clannad comic manuscripts, what he needs to do during this period is just to complete the new serialized comic manuscripts, and exchange information with Eiji Nizuma on fixed dates, and talk about the relevant plots of the comic Electromagnetic Gun. As for Jinghe River, Makoto Takahashi has not deliberately paid attention to it. Hey, Chen, do you know what's going on with Aoi and Mayuri now? Uncle Ding Ding, who was finishing the manga one day, suddenly stopped painting and asked with a troubled look on his face, are they? Little Animal and Mayuri? According to the information provided by Sebastian, the most powerful intelligence expert and voyeur, it is estimated that they are now assisting the manga artist Shizukawa to complete the new series required for the monthly magazine as assistants. Takahashi Cheng answered in a calm tone while waving his brush quickly. Eh? So Aiken already knew. Uncle Ding Ding's expression suddenly became a little depressed. Although there is now another monthly serialization, although I can still handle it now, but Aiken, if we start double serialization in the monthly magazine in the future, should we ask Aoi to come back to help? Of course. Takahashi Makoto suddenly drew a stroke on the manuscript paper, and then continued with a matter-of-fact tone, of course. But if it's just the two of us? Not only will he have to continue to face Takahashi Makoto of True Chuyuni Warriors alone in the future, but he will also have to wait until the double serialization of the monthly magazine begins, and the workload will double. So after hearing Takahashi Makoto's answer, Uncle Ding Ding is really about to cry. Huh? Ding Ding Ji-san, it's just a double serialization in a monthly magazine. If two people can complete it, it's enough. Takahashi Makoto took out a new manuscript and spread it on the table. After a little thought, he began to draw the content of the new page. At the same time, he did not forget to continue to explain to Uncle Ding Ding, if it weren't for the fact that the new comic is more compatible with you, Ding Ding Ji-san, I can actually complete it alone. Not to mention the unexpectedly powerful reinforcements, when the time comes, as long as the seal that restricts my Phoenix Court Kyoma's ability is lifted, it's just a small matter of double serialization in a monthly magazine. It seems that I live in a different dimension from you, Chen. Why do I suddenly have a feeling? Uncle Ding Ding sighed helplessly and sped up the processing speed of the comic manuscript in his hand. If the new comic, Chen, doesn't need you, if you want my help, then I will finish the comic draft of Electric Gun first, although I really want to say this, but by the way, Chen, have you really started drawing that comic? It seems that you have been busy completing that mysterious new comic recently. Hee, Ding Ding Ji-san, you seem to underestimate the crazy cartoonist Feng Guangai Yuan Kyoma, right? Sir Pavlov, wake up the sealed comic draft now. Takahashi Makoto did not stop painting, but gave an order to Sadaharu, who was dozing on the ground. the ritual to lift the barrier is Schrödinger's thorn house. Schrödinger Pavlov is Sadaharu, and Schrödinger is Ruri. Uncle Ding Ding knows this. After all, Uncle Ding Ding has complained about Takahashi Makoto's bad taste in naming his cats and dogs many times before. But now, watching Ding Chun slowly walk to Li Yuli's cat bed and bark in an incomprehensible way, Li Yuli first responded with an incomprehensible meow, and then dragged out a tightly packed cardboard box from the cat bed and handed it to Ding Chun. Uncle Ding Ding was completely at his knees. This, Aiken, your cats and dogs must be monsters, right? Definitely monsters, right? Uncle Ding Ding watched Ding Chun drag the cardboard box in front of him, and then Li Yuli cooperated with her cat claws to cut open the seal full of unknown text, and his fragile nerves were severely shocked again. And, let's not talk about how Ding Chun and Li Yuli communicated. The box is filled with comics, right? Of course. Even a being like my familiar cat wouldn't think that I would hide the manga manuscript in Li Yuli's residence, right? Ignoring the look on Uncle Tintin's face that said normal people would never think of it, Takahashi Makoto lovingly touched the cat and dog that started to rub against him, and let Sadaharu, who is good at physical collisions and has the attribute of sacrifice, attack direction, be good at various high-end cuteness skills, and have a charming body. Luli, who has special attack characteristics, is very reliable and powerful to protect the manga manuscript that is being spied on. No, actually what I want to ask is. Picking up a pile of comic manuscripts from the box, Uncle Tintin flipped through them quickly with a look of surprise on his face. Do you want to ask about the communication method between Li Yuli and Sadaharu? Makoto Takahashi looked at Uncle Tintin with an obviously surprised look on his face, and used examples to prove his point of view according to the method of who claims to give evidence. Speaking of which, compared to Pokemon, for those Pokemon who are clearly different species but can communicate happily without any obstacles, isn't the communication between Dingharu and Ruri normal? No, I just want to ask you, Chen, when were these comic manuscripts completed? Uncle Tintin raised the comic manuscript in his hand and looked at Makoto Takahashi in surprise. Although I already knew it before, Chen, you will start serializing new comics after the completion of Clannad. I also know that Chen, you will definitely prepare some completed comic manuscripts in advance, but the question is, why are all these in my hands electromagnetic? How long ago, Chen, did you consider serializing this comic? Hey. So it's such a boring question. Makoto Takahashi pulled the collar of his white coat, rarely stopping his painting, with a nostalgic look on his face. I remember that was when I was 15 years old one summer. I'm wrong. I'm wrong. Please stop talking, Chen. Seeing Takahashi Makoto start the memory killing again in this way of speaking, that was in the summer when I was X years old, Uncle Tintin spoke decisively. He interrupted a middle-level cartoonist who was still brewing his emotions. I will never ask you such boring questions to Chen again, I swear. So, please Chen, please stop talking. Oh my, Tintin-ji-san, don't you want to hear it anymore? The most exciting story is just about to begin. Makoto Takahashi deliberately showed a look of regret and spread his hands helplessly. There are other things. Do you want to ask a question? It's rare that I'm in a good mood today. Now, I'm talking about Chen. I've heard Yoshida-kun talk about serializing 3 comics in the monthly magazine at the same time. When Uncle Tintin said this, he looked at Makoto Takahashi with a strange look in his eyes and remained silent. After a long pause, he asked with some difficulty, although I don't know what you and Eiji Shinzuma want to do, but don't you think what you two are doing is a bit bullying? Tintin-ji-san, are you referring to my cat? Makoto Takahashi showed a pleasant smile on his face and waved his hand indifferently. How can that kind of thing be considered bullying? It's just domestication and education. That's all. After seeing the performance of Ding Chun and Li Yuli, Ding Ding-ji-san, you shouldn't have any doubts about my legendary taming technique, right? Although I sympathize with Mr. Yoshida very much at the moment, but Uncle Tintin, with a black line on his face, silently mourned for Yoshida for 3 seconds in his heart, and then said what really confused him. What I want to say is, compared to early, the manga artist Shizukawa has been forgotten by most readers. Both the manga artist Komishoin and the manga artist Shinkai Makoto are extremely popular. If the 3 comics are serialized together in a monthly magazine, it will be a great addition to Shizuka. It is very disadvantageous and unfair to you. Visual inspection seems. The smile on Takahashi Makoto's face disappeared, and he seemed to realize the problem. After the comic book Clannad is completed, it goes without saying that the cartoonist Phoenix Institute Jujhen will be very popular. Uncle Tintin, as the assistant responsible for the cleaning up of the comic book Clannad, has a high evaluation of this comic. As for the manga artist Makoto Shinkai, although Madoka has been finished for some time, for most readers, this manga is, well, it has a very deep memory. In fact, what Uncle Tintin wants to say is that most fans of the manga Madoka have quite complicated feelings. After all, there are not a few readers who were deceived by the manga Madoka. Moreover, the final ending of Madoka, although judging from the ending allowing Akatsuki Homura to successfully break away from the infinitely tragic route, can barely be regarded as a kind and loving ending, but when I think of what Madoka has paid the price, in short, the comments given by readers on this comic basically contain words related to depression. In other words, Tintin-ji-san, do you think that whether it is me or Shinkai Makoto, once a new manga is serialized in a monthly magazine, Ryuko will fall into a passive situation from the beginning because of the original popularity? Isn't this natural? Compared with the short-lived manga artist Shizukawa, the comics of manga artist Hohoin Kuma and manga artist Shinkai Makoto will make readers have a tendency to choose from the beginning. Tintin, seeing that Makoto Takahashi was already aware of this problem, the uncle temporarily put aside his worry about being silenced by a middle-class cartoonist because he knew too much, and further analyzed the current situation, although I don't think this is the case. What a disgraceful act. After all, this popularity is also the popularity that cartoonists have gathered through long-term serialization, or through comics, but if, Chang, you want to really compete with Jing Hikun in the monthly magazine once. Oops, this is really a mistake, huh? Tintin-ji-san, do you think I would say that? Makoto Takahashi picked up the manga manuscript of Dream Eaters from the table, with a proud look on his face. He smiled at Uncle Ding Ding and said, ha 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 ha, actually, I already have a plan to deal with it. That's the comic draft of Dream Eaters. Uncle Ding Ding's IQ is pretty good. After thinking about it for a while, he understood Takahashi Makoto's thoughts. Could it be that, Chang, you are in the comic? Whether it's the manga showdown between Ryuko and us, or the various endings of Ruko's Crystal Palace that I've always been looking forward to, all of this is within my control. Makoto Takahashi will Dream Eater the man who comic manuscript was stuffed into Uncle Tintin's hands. He raised his white coat and laughed wildly. Humph, that's right, all of this is the choice of Steins Gate. Drink, ha 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 ha. Sorry, relatives came here 2 days ago. A certain cat thinks that all readers should know about naughty children occupying computers and so on. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 432. The comic Dream Eater, which describes the cartoonist Aki Momenha, has received good reviews from readers since it was serialized. Compared with other inspirational comics in the weekly Shounen Jump, the comic Dream Eaters does not have gorgeous battles or great and lofty ideals. The story just starts with 2 teenagers who want to become cartoonists. Although when the manga Dream Eater was being serialized, readers revealed that the mangaka Shoin Kuma, who created the manga, serialized the manga in a weekly because he got the permission from the editor of Yuisha's weekly magazine, a secret commission from the side, hoping to increase the popularity of the cartoonist Iju Momenha through this comic. However, after this comic was serialized for a period of time, he originally harbored various conspiracy theories and observed this with A conflicting mentality. Readers of this comic have gradually changed this concept. Perhaps since the serialization of the comic Dream Eater, the popularity of the cartoonist Ajumu has indeed increased a lot. Many readers even said that they gradually like it after observing the comic Dream Eater. I fell in love with the Ajumu group in the manga, and then transferred my love to the real Ajumu. But the reason why most readers really fall in love with Aiken Mumenjai is probably not just this, right? In the comic Dream Eater, most of the pages depict the daily life experienced by the cartoonist Aiken Mumenha. Originally, the daily life of cartoonists creating comics was just something that could be used as entertainment for readers. However, with the continuous serialization of the comic Dream Eater, what readers feel from the comics has become it's not just limited to the daily life of cartoonists. There is also a cartoonist named Ajumu Menha. Driven by the ideals of wanting to serialize and wanting to fulfill the promise, he has a strong consciousness of working hard all the time. They stayed up late and worked hard all summer to create a comic. The two teenagers, who had unlimited hopes for the future, suffered a heavy blow at the beginning. The first comic created by the two people, not to mention serialization and animation. After confidently getting it to the editorial department, the editor on the editorial side pointed out many shortcomings. After several attempts, Ajumu Menha finally got the chance to be serialized. However, due to illness and hospitalization, she had to go on hiatus. Although Yachin Mumenjai had fought hard, and although Yachin Mumenjai did not have the idea of giving up because of hospitalization, it is undeniable that the suspension of publication after hospitalization still affected Yachin Mumenjai and affected that person. This comic was in good condition, which caused the popularity of the comic that could originally compete with the talented cartoonist Eiji Shinzuma to decline, and eventually led to it being cut in half. Although Ajumu Menha is now considered a popular cartoonist in reality, in the comic Dream Eater, he is still just a newcomer who has just debuted. Looking at Ajoki Menjai who has been working hard in the comics, and then looking at Ajoki Menjai who has become a popular cartoonist in reality, although the comics have not been serialized to what happened in reality, readers on the other hand, I could vaguely feel the meaning that this comic wanted to convey, and the discordant remarks that had been made before were greatly reduced. Whether it's sports competitions, martial arts training, or even drawing comics like Ajumu Menha, as long as you have a dream and work tirelessly for it, you deserve everyone's respect. After all, if a person has a firm will and moves forward unswervingly towards the goal, then this awareness, no one is qualified to laugh at it, and no one will laugh at it. The stories drawn in comics can make people's blood boil so much, should it be said that it is the work of the fierce Demon King of the Phoenix Academy. This is the evaluation given by most readers after observing the comic Dream Eater. Compared with other comics, the comic Dream Eater tells the daily life of the cartoonist. Although the things that Ajumu Menha experienced can be regarded as ups and downs, it is not so infectious that it breaks through the sky. After all, whether the comics are serialized or cut in half, this can be regarded as a very normal and common thing for a cartoonist. However, many readers feel like themselves after reading the comics. The evaluation given makes my blood boil in my heart. What makes readers feel this way is not the plot told in the comic, but the story of the two good friends named Aiken Mumenha in the process of chasing their dreams, the kind of story that they fall and get up again. It's just the unyielding spirit and the consciousness that is willing to risk one's life in order to fulfill the agreement. Of course, comics are just comics after all, and there are still differences between them and reality. For example, "Hey, I'm talking about Chi-Ren, you seem to be very relaxed recently." I looked at my good friend, who was listening to music with earphones, lying on the sofa in a lazy posture, reading comics, and was immersed in drawing. Landay's classmate was a little unhappy. He hit the manuscript paper with his brush dissatisfied and complained, "Didn't Shinzuma-kun say before? After the monthly clanet is completed, the serialization of new comics will be started directly, and they started serializing 3 parts at the same time." So What do you want to say? After changing to another comfortable position, the yellow-haired man with glasses said in a nonchalant tone while flipping through the comic manuscript, if you want to think about how to deal with it, then there is no need. Although our comic PCP is completely inferior to the comic Clannad in the monthly magazine, it is estimated that it is still quite difficult for Nazuma-kun and Shizuka-kun to rely on new comics to impact the current status of PCP. Although it sounds a bit arrogant to say this, the so-called cartoonists should first have confidence in their own comics, right? That's right, but Akito. Being a little dissatisfied with the lazy attitude of the yellow-haired man with glasses, Landai used the 3 questions of good friend on him. What about Cheng's new comic? Didn't you say you would call Cheng to ask about it before, Akito? What's the specific situation? Cheng said that the style of the new comic is healing, so compared to the other 2 comics, he won't care about the performance after serialization in the future. Halfway through the sentence, the man with yellow hair and glasses suddenly put down the comic and looked at his good friend with a tangled face. Speaking of the highest, it suddenly occurred to me that Cheng's so-called healing is not like Clannad. Although the plot is very exciting, it's really too heartbreaking. But according to Cheng's personality, it is very likely. Landai also thought of the serialized comic Clannad, and a helpless look suddenly appeared on his face. In order to avoid further deterioration in his mood, Landai took the initiative to change the topic. Hey, Akito, speaking of Shizukawa, I remember Mr. Hattori seemed to have said before. The manga artist who worked as an assistant to Makoto after serializing a short story that was amazing, the man with yellow hair and glasses put down the comics, and his expression became serious. According to Mr. Hattori, Shizukawa is said to be about the same age as us, but the style of the comics he completed is more deviant than ours, so the opponent we really need to pay attention to this time is not Makoto Takahashi, nor Eiji Nazuma, but Shizukawa. And Makoto also revealed that Shizukawa's primary target in the monthly serialization seems to be our comic PCP. Is Shizukawa's target? Hee. Landai, who was listening to his good friend's intelligence analysis, suddenly put down his brush and laughed meaninglessly. Huh? The highest? Did you think of something? Seeing his good friend suddenly like this, the man with yellow hair and glasses suddenly felt a little weird. If it were any other time, Landai should be full of fighting spirit. But this meaningless smile now, could it be the personality collapse that Cheng mentioned? No, I just suddenly felt a little happy. Landai picked up the weekly Shonen Jump on the table and explained to his good friend who looked worried, Hey, Akito, do you remember what our goal was when we first became cartoonists? Well, as a cartoonist, get serialized in the weekly Shonen Jump, and then when the cartoon we serialized is animated in the future, you will get married with a Do-chan. The yellow-haired man with glasses, who was talking about his previous goal seriously, didn't seem to notice that his good friend's face turned red because of embarrassment. By the way, Takashi, why did you suddenly think of saying this? Our wishes back then seemed to have been fulfilled. Landai flipped through the weekly magazine and suddenly asked his best friend, Hey, Akito, since our wishes have been fulfilled, why do we continue to serialize in weekly and monthly magazines as manga artists? Isn't it because want to surpass Naizuma Eiji, want to catch up with Takahashi Makoto, is that right? Landai closed the weekly magazine with force and said to his best friend with a smile on his face, although I know this is difficult to do, but it is precisely because of this that we continue to serialize in weekly and monthly magazines as manga artists and continue to chase those 2 people, right? Yeah. Of course. But Takashi, you just suddenly laughed so happily, it doesn't seem to be because of this, right? As for the reason why I'm happy. When mentioning this, Landai's smile on his face became even brighter. Hey, Akito, we have been trying to catch up with Takahashi Makoto and Naizuma Eiji, and we have been rushing forward. We don't seem to notice that we have become the target that others want to catch up with and surpass. Well, it seems to be true. After a moment of silence, the man with yellow hair and glasses threw the comic in his hand aside, and a confident smile appeared on his face. So the highest, what we have to do next is use the same non-kingly comics to compete with the cartoonist Jinghe River in the monthly magazine. Landai classmate clenched the brush, and a confident smile appeared on his face that was consistent with his good friend. So Akito, I'll leave the plot to you. The naughty kid finally left, ha 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 ha. If he stays any longer, a certain cat is really worried that he can't help it. Ahem, sorry to all the adults.